Okay, here we are. We're kicking off the podcast booth at Intersolar. It's 2026, right, Bill?
I think so.
Yeah, so this is Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage podcast. And we have Bill Brooks here, and we're going to have ourselves a really good time. Yep. We'll try to see if we can break some rules. So what we're going to talk about is, what are we going to talk about, Bill?
I don't know. We can talk about anything, but hopefully something about solar.
What about this stuff that those Germans are calling balcony solar?
Oh, balcony solar. Yeah, it's a hot topic these days. So I guess the Germans have a lot of balconies. And so they started putting solar on their balconies and plugging them in. And so we call it plug-in solar in the United States, or some might call it portable solar. And so there's a lot of momentum in the United States right now for that.
So let's talk about how balcony solar works with being legal. Or I know you and I like to do most things illegally.
Yeah.
But if we wanted to be legal with balcony solar, and let's say that we plug it in and we've got a nice balcony and we don't have anything turned on because it's the right time of the year, and it starts going backwards on a meter. I can't really get a straight answer from anybody about what happens there.
Yeah.
Do the utility cops show up at your door?
It really depends on the meter that you have on your house. That's what it actually comes down to. It's funny. Not a lot of people have thought about this part of it, but if you do have excess energy from a PV system, any PV system, it will flow back onto the utility system. And the question is, what kind of meter do you have connected to your house? And there are maybe three kinds of meters that are out there. There's the old style meter that will turn in either direction. And so when we talked about net metering, it would simply, if you started to push power back onto the utility grid, the meter is going to turn backwards. And
the spinning meter.
Yeah, spinning meter.
Yeah, I like those.
It would subtract, and it's kind of fun to watch. It would subtract from your electric bill. Those meters are pretty much gone. I mean, they're still out there, but not that many. And then we have a whole series of newer meters that are used for automatic meter reading and have various electronic capabilities and registers in them. I would say
the meters that are spying on you by Big Brother.
Yeah. And a lot of these meters, people don't understand that they actually record positive consumption or load on your house, whether they're turning in either direction.
So they don't have to go and read that meter, so you can't lower your bill by having vicious dogs in your backyard.
Yeah, that vicious dogs don't work, so they have an automatic meter reading process. But the thing that's confusing to a lot of folks is that when you're pushing power back onto the grid, let's say you're pushing 100 watts back on the grid on a small plug-in system, that would probably be the most you could ever do. Then it's going to actually read like you're using 100 watts, and they're going to charge you for that. So that's another kind of meter, and those are pretty common these days.
So that's it. They'll just charge you for the electricity you make. And I've heard of that happening when people turn on their inverters when they're not supposed to, before they get the interconnection agreement.
And it's a way of, the utilities preventing people from net metering without permission, things like that. And so if they do have a net metering program, then they have to go out and reset the meter or change it from their office to net metering mode, where it actually would read power in either direction and either do it at par, the same rate, or at a reduced rate, depending on what their rate structure is. And then there are meters that don't read any power that goes back to the grid, only power that's brought in. So that's kind of the three main types of meters that are out there. And that really is one of the characteristics that a lot of people don't attribute to this kind of balcony solar stuff.
But what about the net metering meter, where you get credit for exporting? So you had the kind of meter that charges you when you export. You have the kind of meter that just doesn't do anything when you export. And I think they can go in there and program them to credit you for exporting.
Absolutely. They can credit you for producing export, but that usually, almost always, every case that I'm aware of, requires an interconnection agreement. And one of the things that they're trying to do with plug-in solar is to exempt people doing plug-in solar from an interconnection agreement.
So you won't get credit. You won't have net metering. Big deal, I guess, right?
Yeah.
You don't get it
so
anyway.
you want to self-consume as much of it as you can. And if you have a utility that charges you for your excess power, then it makes sense for you to install, to have a energy storage system, a battery.
Yeah.
And so solar and a battery makes a lot more sense anyway. And then do all self-consumption if you can. And then you really don't have to worry about, interconnection agreement with the utility and things like that. So that's one of the things that's going on. There's a lot of getting back to the issues of just the legal aspects of it, doing it correctly. There's nothing in the National Electrical Code that specifically allows for sources to be plugged into branch circuits in a house. Okay.
So branch circuit is where your plug goes.
Yeah. A branch circuit is basically any circuit in your house that terminates at a receptacle or a piece of equipment. And so you don't have that ability to do that. There's nothing specific. Now, there's also nothing specific that says you can't do it either. So, depending on which side of the aisle you sit on, you could say, well, I can do this because there's nothing in there that says I can. And then other folks might say, well, I can't do this because there's nothing that says I can actually do it. So that's an argument. I've put in a proposal that is being considered right now for the 2029 NEC that would include rules around making source connections to branch circuits. That will very likely go through and go into the 2029 code and at least provide a basis on which we can do plug-in systems. The other part about plug-in systems is that we need some level of exemption for a very small plug-in system to not require having to meet all the issues in Article 705.12, which deals with load side connections of sources. And so load side connections of sources, there's a whole bunch of things. There's, the 120% rule and the sum of the branch circuits rule. And so there's all these rules in there that allow you to connect sources on feeders and bus bars and things like that. Again, nothing about branch circuits particularly. But regardless of how you do that, you could even a small system as small as 400 watts would actually not meet any of the rules that are in there right now. And the only way you could actually do it is with power control systems, so PCS. So as part of the proposal that I'm looking at is to have a number like around 400 watts where that one system, you could have one system per house that would be exempt from having to apply PCS. And that's really the only way that I see around those issues to make it official and make it something that the NEC says is okay. Now, the point of a plug-in system is you're not going to pull a permit and you're not going to have an interconnection agreement. And so what's critical, because you don't have either of those things, is that the safety standard for the device, for the system, for this little plug-in solar system has to be really robust to make sure that people don't get shocked by the plug that they're using, that's safe to use, and that when you plug it into a receptacle on a branch circuit in your house, it's not going to cause any problems in your house. And so that sounds really simple, but there's a lot of details in that, and it's just technology, and the technology totally exists. The standard, there is a draft standard. Well, it's an outline of investigation, which is a standard, UL 3700, and that is on that was produced and published by UL on December 11th, 2025. And we're in the process of making revisions to that to actually put in it all the elements that it really needs to make it meaningful so that somebody can go out, buy a system that's been certified to this standard and know that it'll work properly, it'll be safe, and they can save a little money on their electric bill.
Yeah, I could see somebody running into trouble as they go buy some of these things at the big box store. They're like, they go get another one once a month, and pretty soon they have 10 of them, and they're plugged into one extension cord with 4 space heaters, and that might be a little bit dangerous.
That could cause a problem.
Yeah.
It would be really difficult, and somebody would really have to actually understand the physics of it to cause a problem.
Yeah, like
frankly.
and somebody might do it intentionally. Like
they might
me.
do it
Yeah.
intentionally. Who knows? Now, however, when they sift through all the rubble of the fire, they will find that that person completely violated all the rules in the process, and the insurance company, if they have half a brain, will say, "We're not going to cover your fire. Sorry, you're going to have to pay for your own loss." And so, that's why we have standards. That's why we have codes, so that people that follow the rules are safe, and people that don't follow the rules might they might be awarded a Darwin Award.
Yeah.
Whether they die or not, their house might die.
Well, the NEC tells us to read instructions, but people that don't read the NEC, testosterone tells us not to read instructions. So
that's true.
We could run into some problems with that. One of the things that I've also heard of and known some people that had this happen is they're backfeeding the grid, and all of a sudden, like, they're just testing their PV system, and 5 minutes later, somebody drives up and the utility knows that they did that. So do you see that happening with somebody with plug-in solar? They plug it in, and all of a sudden the utility drives up and goes, what are you doing? Yeah.
Well, I've never heard of that happening, but it sounds exciting. And certainly maybe it would give some
like, I guess the smart meters could do real time.
Yeah.
And
maybe some lobbying group will take that on as their next mission to shame utility personnel that go after plug-in solar people and put up signs and and pick it outside of houses that have plug-in solar. That would be cool.
Well, great. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I was at Intersolar Smarter E Germany last year, and they had like a whole ton of booths that were plug-in solar, and I met a plug-in solar installer, and they had a plug-in solar installation company where homeowners can do it, but they would help them do it right and wire manage and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of cool.
That's nice. I mean, plug-in solar is not going to save this planet. It will not save this planet. However, there's a couple of really great things about plug-in solar. One is that it's a gateway drug to all the other things that we see here today in this exhibit hall. So gateway drugs are great. Get people interested.
Yeah, like caffeine. That's a gateway drug.
That's a gateway drug. So getting people interested in solar, it also has a practical benefit. Now, it's going to save people a little bit of money on their electric bill, and that's all great. But really, it's going to help people because they're going to probably buy a little, maybe a portable energy storage system that they could plug their thing into. That could help them in a power outage to charge their phones and various things, just to give them a little bit of power. So there's a lot of other really great benefits to having just even a small amount of solar for a house. And so, I certainly don't. I've gotten involved in this kind of out of fun, and because I'm very involved in the National Electrical Code, and that's one little piece of the puzzle. And now I'm very involved in the standard, and that's another piece of the puzzle, a very important piece of the puzzle. And I'm involved in the legislation, so now I'm actually, starting to testify, write reports and stuff like that for legislation that's being proposed in various parts of the country on this subject. And it's interesting, and it's important not to oversell it, not to try to, claim that it can do something that it can't do, but also to help people understand, legislators understand what the benefits are and how it can help people out. And I like anything that empowers people to, do something themselves. There's, the big attraction to plug-in solar or plug-in PV is for renters and folks that just don't have the opportunity to take advantage of, even let's say a finance system to put on their house, or a lease system. If they don't own the house, or they don't own the apartment, they can't do any of that stuff, but they could, even buy a single panel and be able to make a little bit of power from that. And again, if there's an outage, and there will be more and more of those over the years, then they have something they can do about it.
Very cool. All right, great. And so we're talking a little bit about interconnections here. Interconnections of plug-in solar and interconnected power production sources. That was Article 705 in the NEC, but it's going to be Article 500 in the 2029 NEC. We looked at our crystal ball. There's going to be a big switch up. We just were talking about that in our class yesterday. But maybe, Bill, you could tell us a little bit about your history and the history of grid-tied solar and how that's interconnected.
Haha. Nice. Well, there was a long time ago that I got involved in solar. So
how long?
Well, the first photovoltaic system I ever saw was at Epcot Center in 1977.
Wow.
And I looked at this thing and they said it produces electricity, and I said, you guys are full of crap. That's a bunch of
crystal magic.
Crystal magic. I didn't think much of it, but I knew about solar thermal. I grew up during the energy embargo days, and so I cut my own wood. I helped helped heat my house growing up with wood stoves and stuff like that. And so I was always involved interested in energy, and my dad was interested in solar, so that kind of got me interested. And then when I graduated from college, undergrad in mechanical engineering, I decided to go into graduate school. And at that time, I wanted to do something. I was burned out on school, so I wanted to do something fun or more interesting. And so I decided to do my master's in solar energy. And so helped start the North Carolina Solar Center in 1988. And then got my master's degree, worked at the Solar Center for 10 years, and then in 1998 moved to California and helped start the net metering program in California, which started in March of 1998. So that was really the big kickoff for grid-connected solar. I was involved in developing a lot of the interconnection standards. So the original IEEE standard was IEEE 929, which then was folded into what is now IEEE 1547 for the interconnection requirements, and helped develop how those happened. And then in California in 2000, we were working on Rule 21 for California here. So there was a large group of engineers involved in that, and I was the technical chair of that committee, and we developed the Rule 21 requirements, which we included all the various screens and stuff like that are still used today. Pretty proud of that process. Through that process that we started in 2000, we've interconnected well over 1 million systems in California, and those rules have found their way around the country. So now there's several million systems in the United States, and that whole process, which started very small, when I started my career in 1988 in solar, there were probably 20 to 30 people in the United States that worked on grid-connected solar. And then, and maybe that a same number outside of the United States. So there was, maybe less than 100 people in the world that had dealt with grid-connected solar. And then, it was a lot of hard work setting the foundation, putting the groundwork in. Just like in building a building, you got to do all the groundwork, you've got to do all the foundation work, and then along came a lot of the policies. So in California in 1995, we had net metering passed. Of course, nothing happened after net metering was passed because there wasn't any interconnection rules. So utilities started allowing interconnections to occur in 1998 when the rebate program started in California. And then by 2000, we had Rule 21 going into effect. And so then shortly after that, and right around that time frame, there was everybody that was living at the time might remember the Enron scandal that happened, where California was trying to set up markets for electricity, and Enron gamed the system, and because it was ripe to game the system, and all of a sudden the electric rates jumped up. And whenever you have a really big increase in electric rates, then
we love that.
Then people get ticked off, as they should. And solar was there, all the foundation pieces were there, and so now all of a sudden we had a market almost out of thin air. And so that was 25 years ago, and here we are today, and another great
So how did
conference.
you learn about solar? I mean, I know you said you were at Epcot, which was Disney in '77. And so that's like Mickey Mouse or something. You got a Mickey Mouse education back then.
Right.
You were probably just like barely a teenager, if that, something like that. And then, and so you go up, you said 88 is when you first officially got into solar?
Yeah, I actually took my first PV class from the Florida Solar Energy Center in March of 1988.
Who were your instructors back then?
That was Jim Dunlop and Jerry Ventry.
All right. And
Jim has passed away. Jerry's actually still with us.
Oh, I didn't even realize Jim passed away. And
yeah.
So he wrote that book, Solar Photovoltaic Systems, that I read backwards and forwards and upside down. It was
one of the best, easy to understand text, still is.
And it's you could still buy it.
Yep.
And then tell us about Jerry.
So Jerry Ventry was also worked at the Florida Solar Energy Center. He's actually older than Jim. Jim died of cancer, but he was just a great person and very approachable and helpful. And so those guys really helped me get started. And then I started my learning process, and then began to teach solar as I became more familiar with it. I oversaw grad students at the university working on various projects, and then we were working on interconnection processes for utilities, because it was very clear when I went to do my master's program, I proposed to actually use this solar system that the utility had used for some research. They were done with it, and I proposed them to give it to the university, which they did. And then I actually installed it on the solar house at the university. And then when I went to interconnect this thing, the utility said, "Oh, no, we don't know enough about this. We think we need $30,000 to actually determine whether this 3 kilowatt system is going to actually hurt our system or not," which was complete BS.
That's called a very soft cost.
Yes, that's a very soft cost. So little did the utility know that they were going to spark some very visceral emotions in me that have stayed with me for the nearly 40 years of my career, to make sure that utilities accepted this technology whether they wanted to or not.
Let's see. So you were taking classes for Jim Dunlop, Jerry Venture, and then how about any other people like back then?
Well, Ward Bauer is still, he's, as far as I know, the longest standing member of the solar industry. He started working in PV in 1974, 75, somewhere in there. And he's still active today in his late 70s. Is he 80 maybe?
Yeah, and we pretty much give him credit for inventing the grid tie inverter. So
yeah, grid tie inverter was definitely something he worked heavily on. He actually does hold the invention of the microinverter. So he invented the microinverter.
And he's still out there writing codes, and he's NABCEP board, all kinds of stuff. And
he's a great person and just one of the most amazing people and part of our industry. And then there's Miles Russell, who's probably at this show. He works for Yaskawa now. You can look up papers that he wrote in 1978 at MIT, when he was at MIT. Stuff that's still relevant today. I mean, these guys were just very, very forward thinkers, and they were the people that I looked up to when I started my career in 1988. And, I basically set forth that as an engineer, I was going to spend my entire career in solar photovoltaics. I decided that in 1988. I believe that I'm one of the first, if not, among the first that have ever done that.
Cool. Like for a full-time career in
For a
solar
full-time career
from the beginning.
4 decades.
All right. Okay, cool. So we have a few minutes left. Where do you see the solar industry going in 10 years?
Wow.
Solar and storage and interconnections and bidirectional electric vehicles. Can you even sum it up that quick?
That's that's tough. Well, I guess I'll go to my little go-to which is the 4 technologies, at least in the residential market, and I think it's going to move into the C&I market where we're going to have solar, small amounts of stationary storage, mobile storage, which some people call electric vehicles, and then load control or energy management. And those 4 things properly integrated will allow people anywhere in the United States and literally anywhere in the world to be able to apply these technologies effectively and cost effectively. And what's interesting about that, which goes back to some of the plug-in solar stuff, is that if we can utilize as much or all of the energy that we produce on site, it is possible to not have an interconnection agreement with the utility. And what's really exciting, more than plug-in solar, plug-in PV, is some of the legislation right now that is coming forth to allow non-export systems to not require a interconnection agreement. That, my friends, will change the world. And so we have huge swaths of the United States, at least a third of the United States, where you cannot get an interconnection agreement because the utility just absolutely refuses. Okay. And you don't want to put excess power into the grid because they could catch you. And we don't want that.
We don't like getting caught.
No, we don't like getting caught. So having a non-export system that effectively utilizes the available energy that's brought through your solar panels with stationary storage, EVs, and load control can allow people to take advantage of this at very low costs in the range of 15 cents a kilowatt hour, which is the rate that's out there right now. So that's really what's got me excited. And I think that's where in the residential market, that's where it's going to go. And that same model can be brought out into the commercial sector as well, because that same idea works just as well in a larger scenario.
Great. Okay. Well, it's been really good interconnecting with you, Bill Brooks, and I'm Sean White, and we're up here at the media stage at Intersolar, thanks to Suncast. And until next time, we'll be seeing you. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Stay sunny, everyone.